Hello and welcome to my school channel. My name is Angela, and in this video we're going to continue the government topic by topic video lesson. So we're moving on to the second segment of the topic principles of government. We're going to move on to other principles such as constitutionalism, representative government and the like. Please stay with us, don't go anywhere, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the My School channel. Like I said, we are moving on to the next principle of government, constitutionalism. Let's dive right into it. Constitutionalism refers to a political philosophy and a system of government that emphasizes the importance of adhering to a constitution as the supreme law of the land. So, when the constitution is obeyed and respected in a particular country, they are adhering to the principle of constitutionalism. Let's move on to the next slide. So it involves the principles and practices that limit government power, protect individual rights, and establish the framework for governing a state. So all of these things are stipulated in a constitution. There are certain things within the constitution that helps to limit the power of each branch of government, that helps to protect individual human rights, and to establish the framework for the governance of the states. All of these things are stipulated within the constitution. And when a particular state adheres to the dictates of the constitution, they are adhering to this principle. So constitutionalism involves adherence to the rule of law, the principle of separation of power, and the protection of fundamental human rights. Let's move on to the next slide. So what's the difference between a constitution and constitutionalism? While constitution is a legal document, constitutionalism is a philosophy, it's a principle. So the Constitution is the written or unwritten document that serves as the fundamental law of the states, outlining the structure of government, defining the powers of its branches, and protecting individual rights. So it is the document, it is that document, whether written or unwritten, that helps to outline the structure of the government, the rights of individuals within that state, and every other thing that helps to ensure the smooth running of government. So the Constitution is a legal document. It embodies the principles of constitutionalism. It also serves as the supreme law that provides the framework for governance and setting the rules for the exercise of power. But constitutionalism, on the other hand, is the underlying philosophy or system of governance that upholds the principles embedded in the Constitution. It is the principle, it is the philosophy that underlies the Constitution itself. So it is the broader philosophy that guides the interpretation and application of the Constitution. It emphasizes the importance of adhering to constitutional principles, such as the rule of law, separation of power, and the protection of individual rights. So now let's move on to the next slide. Why is constitutionalism important? Why is it important to adhere to the dictates of the Constitution? One of the reasons is that it limits governmental powers. So constitutionalism restricts and defines the powers of government to prevent arbitrary or tyrannical rule. By establishing a constitution, governments are bound by a set of rules and principles. So when a constitution is established in a country, it prevents the government from having too much power. It helps to limit the powers of the government so that they do not abuse the rights of the citizens. And that reason for constitutionalism is that it helps to protect individual rights. Constitutionalism seeks to safeguard the rights and liberties of individuals. A constitution typically outlines the fundamental rights that citizens possess, e.g. the right to life, freedom of speech, etc. We talked about how these fundamental rights are stipulated in the constitution of the country, especially here in Nigeria. Our 1999 constitution stipulates all of the rights of the citizens. All of this helps to protect the rights of the citizens. They become aware of the rights that they have, and they can use that document to seek redress in the courts of law. It also helps to promote the rule of law. It promotes the rule of law by ensuring that government actions are based on established laws and legal principles. No one, including governmental officials, is above the law. It's above those laws that are stipulated in the Constitution. It also involves the separation of power. So constitutionalism is very important because it helps to separate powers among the different branches of government, that's the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, and prevents the concentration of power in a single entity. Lastly, it helps to ensure accountability and transparency. Constitutionalism requires government officials to be accountable for their actions. It emphasizes transparency in governance and enables citizens to know how government decisions are made. When you have the Constitution and you can see all of the responsibilities of the government, you can ensure that the government is accountable to those responsibilities stipulated in the Constitution. So now let's move on to the next slide. So we're moving on to another principle of government, which is representative government. What is representative government? It is a system in which citizens elect representatives to make decisions and enact laws on their behalf. So it's a system of government where citizens vote for their leaders, those representatives that will help to represent their interests when they get to office. Now let's move on to the next slide. So it's a form of government that is contrasted with direct democracy, where citizens participate directly in the decision-making process. So direct democracy is where the citizens come together to make decisions on their own. But representative democracy, on the other hand, is a system where they elect representatives who will make decisions for them. So in a representative government, elected officials represent the interests and views of the constituents in the legislative and executive branches. So you elect representatives both in the legislature, in the National Assembly, and in the executive arm of government. Let's move on to the next slide. So what are the features of representative government? One of the features is that citizens choose representatives through periodic elections. They vote for their representatives through elections. The government also operates within the framework of a constitution. The constitution is supreme in a representative government, and decisions are guided by the constitution, by legal principles. Powers are also distributed among different branches, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, to prevent the concentration of authority. Elected representatives are accountable to their constituents and can be held responsible for their actions. They know that when they get to power and they do not perform their responsibilities, nobody will vote for them during the next election cycle. In a representative government, the press is free. They are free to disseminate information to the people and to express the opinions of the people. So, in order to ensure accountability in the government, the press has to be free to criticize the government as they choose, in order to ensure that they are accountable and in order to educate the citizenry. So another feature is that multiple political parties and diverse viewpoints coexist. So this offers voters a range of choices. There have to be so many different political parties, and they have to be able to express different viewpoints in a representative government. Now let's move on to the next slide. What are the conditions necessary for the establishment of representative government? What are those things that need to be in society that helps to ensure that representative governments can operate successfully? One of them is free and fair election. The cornerstone of a representative government is the conduct of free and fair election. The electoral process must be transparent and free from any form of malpractices. Without free and fair election, there will be no representative government, because you need an election that is free for all members of the society and that is fair, to ensure that the people that are elected are people that are actually representative of majority of the people in the country. And that condition necessary for the establishment of representative government is political pluralism. A representative government requires the presence of multiple political parties. This ensures that citizens have a variety of choices for leaders who adequately represent their interests when they assume office. So when there are so many political parties, citizens can choose from this list of political parties those leaders that will represent their interests, their values, their beliefs, their ideals when they get to position of power. Let's move on to another condition. We have the rule of law and the Constitution. The existence of a strong rule of law supported by a well-defined constitutional framework is paramount. The Constitution serves as the supreme law, outlining the structure of government, the separation of power, and the protection of individual rights. All of these are necessary for a representative government to exist. And that condition is citizen participation. Active citizen participation is fundamental to the success of a representative government. This includes civic engagement, participation in election, and involvement in public discourse. So in order for representative government to actually work, the citizens have to participate in the process of election of this representative. They should also participate in political discourses. That means they should discuss about various issues that are plaguing the society, so that their interests, their opinions about these issues are adequately represented. Now let's move on to another condition. Independent judiciary. is also necessary for representative government because it acts as a crucial check on the powers of the executive and the legislature. The judiciary ensures that laws and policies adhere to constitutional principles. When they do not adhere to the Constitution, action can be taken against members of the legislature and the executive. Let's move on to another one. We have political education and awareness. Establishing a representative government requires a politically informed citizenry. Political education ensures that citizens understand their rights, the political process, and the importance of their active participation. So when citizens are not educated enough, they cannot participate actively in a representative government. Let's move on to another condition. We have fundamental human rights. For a representative government to be established, essential rights such as freedom of expression, association, movement, and press must be protected by the Constitution. All of these rights allow citizens of the country to come together to form an association and to discuss various political issues within the country and to actively choose members of the society who can actively represent them when they are given the position of authority. Now let's move on to the next slide where we discuss the merits of a representative government. One of the merits is that it provides citizens with choice. So through periodic election, voters can select individuals who align with their values, their ideologies, and policy preferences. So with that, you have so many political parties that citizens can select from, and with that, there is a lot of choice. You can choose someone who actually represents those values and ideals that you possess. It also leads to efficiency in government. Elected representatives who often possess expertise in various fields can focus on policy formulation and legislation. So rather than citizens making decisions about things that they do not understand, they can choose someone who has expertise, who has knowledge of how to adequately implement policies within the society that will favor them. This leads to efficiency in government. It also leads to accountability. So the threat of losing office incentivizes elected representatives to act in the best interest of their constituents. So when they are aware of the fact that they can lose that position of authority at any time, they will be incentivized to do the right thing, to perform their responsibilities adequately. Another merit of representative government is that it leads to political stability. So the periodic and orderly transfer of power through elections helps to avoid abrupt and disruptive changes in leadership. So every 4 to 5 years, there is always an election, and then you transition from one leadership to another. This helps to create political stability within the country. Now let's move on to another slide. Let's discuss the demerits of representative government. So one of the demerits is that it leads to limited direct participation. So this indirect form of governance means that individuals have few opportunities to directly influence policies. Rather, they have to elect representatives who may not adequately represent their interests when they get to power. And that demerit is that there is potential for corruption. So the potential for corruption may arise from factors such as campaign financing, lobbying, and the influence of special interest groups. So when representatives are canvassing for votes sometimes, they may do that using corrupt means, such as bribing the citizens of the country to vote for them, even when they do not have the knowledge, the expertise to run the country. So this is one of the demerits of representative government. And that demerit of representative government is that it is costly to run. Campaign expenses, administrative costs, and salaries for elected officials contribute to the overall financial burden. So before officials are elected into office, they have campaign expenses, they have to canvass for votes, and all of that requires financial resources. When they get to office as well, they have a lot of administrative costs. They have to be paid salaries and they have to have allowances. All of this leads to the financial burden on the society. So this shows that a representative government is costly to run. And that demerit is the decision making is usually slow. Deliberation, negotiation, and the need for consensus building within legislative bodies may result in delayed policy outcomes. Remember, we talked about how in the legislature there has to be some form of consensus before laws are made and before policies can be implemented within society. So all of this usually leads to slow decision making as opposed to a direct democracy where they can make decisions on the spot when all the citizens agree. So these are all the demerits of representative government. I will come to the end of this segment. So if you would like to continue on this journey with us, please go down to the link in the description below and subscribe to the government topic by topic video lesson. There you can continue with us. We're going to move on to other principles of government like centralization and decentralization. We're also going to discuss various case studies for these different principles of government, and after that we are going to move on to standardized questions, where we're going to answer some WAEC and JAMB past questions based on all we've done so far in this video lesson. So I believe you're enjoying this content. If yes, please do not forget to hit the like button, click on the subscribe button, and lastly tap on the notification bell to get informed as soon as we release the next videos.